Ma'am, Mike,
what is
please.
it, 6 o'clock.
Mike, please.
Oh, it is, not doing well?
That's better. Oh, that's better.
Okay, all right, I'll make a post. You're welcome. All right, thank you. Okay, roll call of members. As you can see, Mayor Schick is not here this evening, and I am here. Otherwise, everyone is present. Okay, additions to the agenda. Hearing none. Okay. Do I need a motion for that to accept it as it is? Okay. Okay. Approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Everyone else?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Aye. Chair votes aye. Approval of March 2nd, 2022, and March 16th, 2022 minutes. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call vote?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, all right, council members, liaison and commission reports. Where do we want to start? Who wants to go first?
Start with the long one, is that what they
Dr.
said?
Sullivan, would you want to start for us?
All right.
Thank you.
So, there's a couple of printed copies out there, and this will be posted on the website and linked to the Facebook page, so that you can keep up with everything that I have reported to me as NGO, non-governmental organizations doing. Coming up, the Alliance of Colonial Beach Community Organization is still working on the Keep Colonial Beach Beautiful campaign, and there's supposed to be new beach signs added and stencils added. Also, they have a new NGO that's getting started called Colonial Beach Creative. Coming to the table in our interracial conversations group, the next meeting is August 23rd, the location to be determined. WWER, please make note of their contact information and send your public service announcements to PSA@WWER. They are in the process of interviewing all the town council and school board candidates. There are 12 candidates on the ballot. All 12 were invited. 7 of the candidates have responded. So that means there are 5 out there that have not responded. So this is a reminder that if you want to participate and have a short interview done on the radio, you need to respond to your letter that you received in the mail or your email by this coming Friday so they can get you scheduled. If you are a candidate and you didn't receive the mailed letter or the email, please contact Ted at wwer.org. The interviews will be aired in September, and they will be aired hopefully prior to the forum, which is also prior to the first day that early voting opens, so that you'll be able to hear from all the candidates before early voting opens. James Renaud's birthplace had 277 visitors in July. And Bucky is pleased to announce that visitors that are staying in Colonial Beach are riding the trolley to the birthplace, and that's increased their capacity. They also have private group tours available by request. They have 2 new docent volunteers in training. And remember, they are open, the house and the museum are open Saturday and Sunday from 11 to 4, and the grounds are open daily. The village The game day, they do a game day on the second Thursday at the Meadows Activity Room. And the village luncheons are on the fourth Thursday of each month at local restaurants, and everyone is welcome to attend. There will be a membership meeting near Labor Day to determine the events and activities for 2023. The Colonial Beach Community Foundation, their August Welcome to Colonial Beach meetup will be right here at Town Center on August the 18th at 6 p.m. Vicki Luna, the Vice Chair of the Planning Commission, will be speaking. The Community Crisis Fund supports the food pantries at local churches. Please donate online at cbcommunityfoundation.org or purchase a To Be Blessed cookbook from Hawthorne Mercantile to support the Community Crisis Fund. September 10th will be the 4th annual Northern Neck Beach Music Festival on Town Hill. Discount tickets are available for locals. You can get them at the Beach Shop, Coldwell Banker Elite, the Chamber of Commerce, Riverview Inn, Colonial Beach Brewing, Ice House Brewery, and Halls, or online. And their 2021 community report has been published and can be found online at their website. BAM, September is going to be a busy month. BAM has their beach arts and music and mentoring annual fundraising concert featuring Tommy Two-Tone and local bands. It will be on the 3rd from 12 to 5, and there will be food and auction and raffle and adult beverages and games and projects. They're still looking for volunteers, so if you're interested, please contact John or Eileen Heath. And they continue to work on their backpack project, which you can make donations from their Facebook page. The civic groups, the American Legion, the VFW Post, the Moose Lodge, and the Eagles all have their contact information on this form. I didn't get reports of anything special going on coming up, but they always have great activities. Colonial Beach Green Space is $100 short of the $3,000 goal to fund the Oyster Wars historic highway marker. This was a marker that was gotten approved for the town, and Colonial Beach Green Space has raised just over $2,900 towards the cost of the marker. They have also met their goal of 8 benches for Eleanor Park. They will be the same style benches that you see around town, the new ones. They'll be installed once the basic site plan is approved, and they have locations for the benches. They have ongoing fundraising projects, including the Walter Kern Memorial and Scholarship Program, the Colonial Beach Community Garden, including Riverwalk on Irving Avenue, the Osprey Cam and Osprey Festival Fund, and the ADA Beach Access Ramp Fund. And they also encourage you to adopt a park using the form on the town website to help pick up and give a little extra cleaning up to our parks. The Colonial Beach Humane Society and Colonial Beach River Dogs, you can contact Pat or myself about these initiatives. We have a standing spay-neuter appointment with the Charles County Humane Society in Maryland for 5 feral cats each month. So if you have feral cats that you think we can trap, then we'll be glad to help you take care of that. October 2nd is Bark on the Beach. It's to celebrate the off-season opening of our beaches to dogs. And October 15th is the annual Dog Day to benefit the Humane Society and River Dogs that's held at the Colonial Beach Yacht Center next to Dockside. The Historical Society Museum and Visitor Center is open on Saturdays and Sundays. The Memories of Colonial Beach Meetup is on Saturday, August 27th at Hunan Diner. The Artist Guild has the Friday Art Walk coming up on August the 12th. And also starting that night will be the annual Potomac River Regional Art Show right here at Town Center that will be open Saturdays and Sundays through the 28th. Downtown Colonial Beach is continuing to wait on the DORA application. I don't know if there's going to be an update from the town or not, but they're waiting for that notification from ABC. And they continue to try to keep an inventory of available commercial spaces for businesses coming into town. And last but never least, the Colonial Beach Chamber of Commerce has a bunch of events coming up. On the August 20th and 21st is the annual Rod Run to the Beach and Waterfest on the boardwalk. So double your fun by celebrating all of the old hot rods on Town Hill and then going down and visiting with the mermaids on the boardwalk. September 3rd and 4th is the annual Arts and Crafts Festival on the boardwalk. September 20th, the Chamber and the Foundation will host the Candidates Forum for the Town Council, and the location is to be determined. And then, of course, Bike Fest coming up October 6th through 9th, which includes the Alzheimer's Walk on that Saturday. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Williams?
Yes, just a few updates for Public Works. First off, I'd like to introduce our new Director of Public Works, Ms. Bayer. She joins us from serving with the City of Fredericksburg, where she has spent approximately the last 5 years serving as the Director of Public Works and Assistant Director of Public Works. During that time, she has overseen over 100 employees in various functions, divisions, such as streets, water, urban forestry, wastewater, recycling, trash, sidewalks, fleet maintenance, facilities management, and maintenance, landscape management, stormwater, MS4, and environmental sustainability. Before her time with the City of Fredericksburg, she also worked for the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and the Department of Environmental Quality. So obviously she's got a lot of experience, so I'd like to welcome her to our team and really look forward to working with her. In fact, we met today, or not today, Wednesday, and so I got to know her a little bit and a little bit more of her background, and we discussed some of the things in town that I bring up tonight. As people know, that there's always, different things that concerns that people bring to me as a Public Works liaison. So I'll look forward to working with her on those. Like one person has emailed several times about their concerns about the sidewalks and especially the handicap spot in front of the library. So I brought that to her attention to see if there's any possible solutions to that. And also I mentioned the central drainage area, which being brand new, she's still looking into that. So look forward to hearing a little more about that, because that's one of the issues that was brought up by a resident recently. I also talked to her about possibly doing by the town doing some kind of a sponsor of the tote trash cans that we've done in the past. So she'll look into that, or Ms. Adams Jacobs will as well. Just to be clear, somebody had said on social media that I advocated for buying a new trash truck. That is not the case at all. No new trash truck. We just got one 2 years ago, or not even that. So just to make that clear. And, the pier inspection, several residents have brought to my attention that they were concerned about the pier inspection. And I did talk to the town manager, and she reassured me that we did have an inspection of a certified engineer. So I just wanted to let people know that, since there's been concerns there. And I've also asked for copies of those so I can share those as well. We've done 34, the Public Works has been working hard over the last week or so, and they've done 34 missed utilities. They've checked and cleaned culverts and ditches, a lot of those routine stuff that they do in various locations in the town after storms. They've also done the refuse, the trash pickup. Over the last couple weeks, they've had over 35 tons. And they've also cleaned out some pipes and hauled away that, and checked the debris after the storm, and also took multiple dumpsters to the sludge dumpsters landfill. If people don't know what that is, that's basically the leftovers from the sewage treatment plant. That's all I've got. Thank you. Again, welcome, Ms. Meyer.
Mr. Allison?
Yes, ma'am. We'll start with Parks and Rec. So in conjunction with the police department, Parks Rec did the National Night Out. It was a great turnout. thank you for the police department for hosting that. I'm sure lots of people like to dunk you, sir. So that was exciting. Mr. Bobby Duke did a wonderful job as well, getting out and about and make sure everybody's, staying where they need to go and do the things they need to do and all that good stuff. So praise to him. Another thing we have is August 9th on Town Hill, we got movie night. This will be the Breakfast Club. We're kind of sticking with the 80s theme for that. So please come out for the August 9th Town Hill for that. And also on September 6th is our next meeting for Parks and Rec. For the Planning Commission, just so everyone's aware, there's still an opening for the Planning Commission. So if you would like to put in an application for that, I'm sure they would love to have an additional person on that commission. Along with that, the Planning Commission had expressed interest in a master plan for the PUD-R at their last Planning Commission and also our town council meeting when we voted on the PUD-R. They also expressed doing a master plan for the town-wide, but if we could focus it on the PUD-R, that'd be great at first. So what I would ask the Planning Commission to provide to the town council for their next meeting are the reasons why a master plan should be required to be developed and what benefit it would provide before we actually recommend moving it forward. So that way we get feedback from them to give us the benefits and the pros and cons and that kind of stuff to illustrate why a master plan is required for a PUD-R. And then at our next meeting that we can then direct them or not direct them to do that. And that's pretty much all I have.
All right, thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Allison. Mrs. Clement, would you like to go next, please?
Really, but okay.
Yeah.
I have an update from Dr. Mitchell, Superintendent of Colonial Beach Schools. The fall sports schedules are out for football and volleyball. I made copies for everyone so you can come to the games and support our drifters. I put the copies out front if you're interested. Colonial Beach Public Schools will be changing the morning and arrival process for the new school year. No parent cars will be allowed to enter the front of the school, as we have done for years. Elementary arrival and dismissal will start on First Street and proceed to the back of the school, Service Road. High school arrival and dismissal will start on Lincoln Avenue and proceed to the side of the gymnasium across from the baseball field. Students who are riding the bus will load in the front of the school. This year, we will enforce student parking. Students will be allowed to purchase a parking pass. The fees remain the same as last year. Students walking home will utilize the new crosswalk and sidewalk, which leads to the crosswalk on First Street. Principals will send a map and communication of the new process to parents during or after the open house. That's the end of Dr. Mitchell's update. I also want to let you know that parents will need to get 2 car tags, pickup passes, if their students will be a daily pickup. Go to the Colonial Beach Public Schools website, complete the form online, and pick up your passes at the open house or on the first day of school. Morning drop-off begins at 7:35 a.m. and ends at 7:55 a.m. Afternoon pickup begins at 2:45 p.m. So Colonial Beach Public Schools open house is this Friday. It'll be at 2 to 5 p.m. August 5th. And our first day of school is Monday, August 8th. So make sure your 7th and 12th graders meet the 2022 to 23 immunization requirements. Check the school website for more info. I'd like to give a big thank you to BAM for delivering school supplies to the students and to the staff of our Colonial Beach schools. BAM also supplied lunch to our new teachers to welcome them to our Drifter family, and also to our seasoned teachers, I won't say old, to show appreciation for the most important and unpaid job in the world. Welcome back, Drifters. I'm sorry that summer vacation is over so soon. This will be a great year, and we're excited to have you back.
Thank you very much. Save the best for last.
I will be brief, nothing.
I will be brief. I have nothing either, except I hope the mayor feels better, so. All right, on to presentations. No presentation. Okay. Citizen input then.
We have two that came in via email and one in person.
Okay,
Do you want to do the one in person first and then the emails?
that would probably be best.
Okay, Mr. Devonte?
All right, good evening, everybody.
Can you use the mic?
No, I needed it. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. I would like to address what's coming up is one of the tabs here, this license plate identification thing for $35,000. I have a question. How are tickets being handled now? Anybody?
I will get back with you on.
Well, last time I brought something up was 4 months ago. They were supposed to get back to me. Nobody still hasn't gotten back to me about that. So how are parking tickets given out now? I mean, how do we determine what cars are supposed to get parking tickets?
We have handheld meters that
Okay.
work with Blower that identifies which vehicles have paid for the parking for the time period.
So what's wrong with that system?
We have limited numbers and the town has implemented a permanent position
Yeah.
for that. So we do not have enough material to go around for that permanent position as well as police officers.
Well, if there's one permanent position, they need one reader, right?
But we also need backups if something breaks.
Okay, so yeah, how much do the meters cost?
$5,000 to $10,000 a meter.
$5,000 to $10,000 a meter?
I don't have an exact.
Chief, you've given a lot of information, thank you.
What's that? The thing is, you know, we spend money around here like it grows on trees. If we have a system that's working, you put the parking person in the golf cart and they can drive Irving around the area here. It accomplishes 2 or 3 things. Okay, one, no impact on the environment. Low carbon footprint compared to driving a big SUV around or a car. Okay, it gets an officer out there in front of the people, out of the cars where people can see him, maybe some interaction, which we don't have enough of in this town. Okay, I understand what you want. You want to mount this thing to a car so somebody can just drive around and like they have in Fredericksburg. You know, but we're a small town. It's only 3 square miles. It can't be that hard to police. And we have very limited areas where we have paid parking. We don't have it all over town. I don't understand why we got to spend $35,000 on something like this.
Thank you.
You know, your guys are responsible for spending our money. Spend it wisely.
Thank you.
Okay, the first email is from Mr. Joe Kelly. It says, "Dear Mayor Schick and council members, I see that the town is considering purchasing a parking enforcement license plate reader for $36,111. Can you please explain to us taxpayers why we need this purchase now and it probably won't be operational for a month and then we stop charging for parking starting in October, which is a good plan. Further, $21,595 can qualify as a CIP expenditure. The balance of the cost is for a subscription, probably annual, in services. These costs look like operating expenses of the police department and should be accounted for under their budget along with the cost of the new enforcement officer. This item raises a more fundamental concern, that is, the town has sold or will sell the downtown parking lots, Walter Avenue and Taylor Street. That generate as much as 70% of the town's parking revenue. What's the town's plan for visitor parking in the future? At the rate we're going, after the property sale, we'll spend as much money on parking enforcement as we receive in parking revenue. A detailed analysis of parking income and expenses would be extremely helpful and informative for all of us taxpayers. I'll be glad to discuss these concerns and others relating to parking at any time. Thank you. Okay. And the second email is from Mr. Jim Green. Says he has two questions. One, my first question is, was an inspection done on the pier by an outside engineer prior to reopening? Did the town request and receive a report from that engineer? Second question is, in the spring of 2020, it was observed that we had a release of biological waste release on Colonial Avenue. At the time, the town said it was because of a 100-year storm event. Fast forward to last week, we had what appears to be the same issue. What has been done to fix this issue since the spring of 2020?
And that is it. Thank you. Okay, old business.
Madam Vice Mayor, I'd like to clarify two questions
Okay,
while we're here at this item.
thank you.
First, I have Ms. Byer here who can speak a little bit to that rain event. Although she was not here in 2020, she was here as of last week and can speak a little bit about that. And I will speak to the pier inspection. There was a pier inspection completed. That was completed by an outside engineer. At this time, we will be working with our Public Works Director to take a broader look at our pier replacement and replacement schedule of some pilings that have been identified and were identified before. Ongoing replacement and repair of our pier as necessary is something that the town will always be looking into and prioritizing as necessary. So we will be bringing forward that item probably in either September or October for some council direction moving forward once Ms. Byer has had some opportunities to take a look. I'll turn it over to her to answer the other question.
Thank you. We were made aware, can everyone hear me? No.
No, it's pull it closer.
Event that happened last week was over and above what we usually get as far as rainfall. We did see the post on Facebook, on social media, about biological waste coming out of a manhole. We did send crews. There was nothing observed. There was nothing observed surcharging out of that manhole when crews went to look. So we did not set eyes on any biological waste. There was no evidence of biological waste when we went to look at the area. And what was there was paper trash, and we did clean it up with the street sweeper. We did call DEQ and report the social media post to them, just so that it would come from us and not social media. We are reviewing the central drainage project, and India and I will be working on that. We had a meeting on it today, and we'll be bringing that forward to you as well in the future, in the near future.
Thank you.
Madam Vice Mayor,
Yes.
I think this kind of is old business. I just wanted to ask Tony, what was the question you asked 4 months ago you didn't get an answer to?
Question was whether the food trucks were paying for utilities. And Robin said that they would not answer that here in the meeting. She would get back to me. That was 3 or 4 months ago that I asked that question.
We'll get an answer for you.
Well, I already got the answer, so it doesn't matter. At this point, it's a mute point now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Guess on to new business, huh? All righty. It's your show right now.
So I was looking for a document I was trying to put up on the screen. So you have in front of you for public hearing tonight, an amendment to Article 7 of the zoning ordinance, which comes to you from the recommendation of the Planning Commission. Currently, theaters are a conditional use in the RC district, and the recommendation is to amend Article 7 to make theaters that are permitted, with a permitted occupancy of up to 70 persons, a by right use. And to retain theaters that, with a permitted occupancy of more than 70 persons, to retain that as a conditional use, both, again, in the RC district.
We'll go and we'll open up the public hearing.
We have one signed up, Mr. Savage.
Okay.
Good morning, good evening, Ms. Robertson and council members. My name is Thomas Savage and I live at 1109 Irving Avenue in the playground of the Potomac. I'm on the board of directors of the Colonial Beach Performing Arts Association, and I support this important change to the town zoning ordinance. No one seems to know why many years ago theaters were made a conditional use in our town. In all of the surrounding cities, towns, counties, as well as other waterfront towns in Virginia that our board has investigated, theaters are always a permitted use in a commercial zone. In the resort commercial area of our town, there are already 2 outdoor theaters, one at high tides, and I emphasize outdoor theaters, one at high tides and the other one on, as you all know, on Town Hill. These facilities have been used for years and demonstrate the need for and the ability of the downtown to accommodate such theaters. Colonial Beach's comprehensive plan and its vision statement, to your right, says that we are to encourage arts in our town. This amendment makes it easier to establish small indoor theaters, including the planned improvements that we have for our playhouse on Hawthorne Street. Please also note that the indoor theaters can provide live entertainment all year round, thereby attracting tourists to our town during off-season. Many of our patrons routinely go out to dinner before our show and stay overnight in our various accommodations overnight after our show, bringing other business to Colonial Beach businesses. So we thank you for considering the updating of our zoning code and for recognizing that this is an activity that's clearly desired by our citizens and our visitors. And we hope to see you all at the Playhouse this fall. We have a show coming and also at Christmas time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? None of that? Okay, then we will close what I call it.
Yes, you close public hearing.
Okay.
Can I speak to that?
Yes.
Yes, Ms. Williams, come on
I
up.
didn't get to sign up for that.
Okay.
I didn't know that was happening.
Paige Williams, 1535 Irving Avenue. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but I heard the topic and I wanted to say that I support this if this is about having a theater in town. I'm a total advocate for the arts and especially the theater. My daughter graduated from with a 4-year degree from George Mason University with a theater degree. So I'm very passionate about theater. So that's all I want to say. I didn't go theaters.
Thank you.
Thank you, bye.
Now we will close the public hearing at 6:35. Okay. All right, council action. I messed up too. I have to put something in here. I did not do the financial update, so I need to do that. On July 22nd, 2022, the town received the second track of the American Rescue Plan Act funding, also known as ARPA funds. And town finance staff is beginning the early stages of pre-audit work in preparation for the town's annual audit. So you needed to know. Thank you. Okay, now, the, we need to do a motion.
I move that we
Thank you.
approve the amendment to zoning ordinance Article 7, which is, I understand it basically allows a theater to be a by right use in resort commercial, as opposed to the current situation, which requires a CUP, conditional use permit.
Do I have a second?
Just for pardon me, for clarification, it would be a permitted use for theaters up to 70 permitted occupancy. And the permitted occupancy is an objective standard was used, just, that's the fire permitted occupancy. So it is an objective standard, but it would remain, and I apologize for not having the language, and I can send it and get it up on the screen here momentarily. But it would remain a conditional use for over 70 folks, just to clarify.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
As explained, second.
Thank you.
I would just, I agree with everything that the citizens have said. It made no sense to me. I looked at the other ordinances, and a small theater is allowed to light in this type of zoning. It's certainly compatible with their vision for downtown Colonial Beach. And I would offer that perhaps the reason it was made a conditional use had something to do with the last theater that we had here, the Mayfair, that caught on fire and burned down in the 70s. So maybe that raised some red flags. And of course, today theaters are very different. They don't have that same fire threat, even movie theaters, that they used to.
Well, thank you. Okay, good. All right, we shall,
Can we have more discussion on that?
oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So,
As much as you want, go ahead.
in looking into this, and not that I'm opposed or for this particular thing, but one of the concerns that I had was when talking to our town attorney, knowing that the theater of any type in the resort commercial area requires a cup to operate. We did not have record of our current theater having a cup within the downtown resort commercial area. And that poses a problem itself of having a business establishment that is a theater that is running without a conditional use permit. And then we are then changing the text to allow them without going through the proper steps to get the cup to begin with. So that was my only concern in regards to any businesses that we have that are in downtown that, you know, essentially not following our own processes. So that's all I have.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I am for this. I just question. The only concern I have is parking. Does anybody know, like, if somebody wanted to put a theater and say they had a building and they want to put a 70-person theater in there, does the town have any way of ensuring that they would have enough parking to do so? No doubt.
So new development would have to comply with the parking regulations. Current existing buildings are subject to the zoning that attaches to them. So existing buildings, they don't have that requirement, because unless they are a conditional use. So a larger theater would then have to submit a conditional use permit, and that would, I feel certain, would be one of the issues that would be discussed during that process. So that is, that would change that issue in this context. And
Thank you.
just, and the exact language, which I apologize for not having that before, is, for the amendment, is on the screen now.
Yeah, I don't think you have enough taps to make it. No.
May I ask for clarification from the attorney on something?
Yes, you may.
So could you tell us what else is already by right that might also pose parking problems, but it's not addressed because it's by right? I know
In this particular district,
Yeah,
so actually the list is on the screen at the moment.
So, for example, I'm just looking for something that might have larger groups of people all come at one time. Churches or houses of worship would probably fall into that category. Commercial nano breweries possibly would fall into that category. Commercial recreational establishments. So there are lots of things that already, if any building was gone into and renovated, that would expect to have larger groups of people all come at once. Doesn't make this a unique situation in the zoning.
Depending on, the occupancy of those facilities, I would presume that restaurants, for example, would have an occupancy similar, I would guess, to these smaller theaters. Again, a bit of speculation, but similar.
I also, it was like quite obvious when the planning commission held their meeting on this, that, this business already exists. And they got their business license and their occupancy permit or whatever else they need to get without a CUP. And I'm wondering if that was an oversight by staff. Who's responsible for telling them that they need to get a CUP?
Well, technically, the individual is responsible for knowing what uses are permitted or only permitted with conditional use or not permitted at all, for example. And that happened before any of us honestly were here. So I don't know the process or how that happened. All of us should know, citizens and town staff alike, but I just don't know how that process went through.
So should it be some sort of a checkpoint with the occupancy permit or the business license that ensures that they conform to the zoning ordinance?
Business license, that is it oftentimes is, there is a connection, a combined effort to ensure that zoning is appropriate. And those communications do take place. I don't know the occupancy permit issue. We have to sign off, the town has to sign off at the end. It is issued ultimately by the county, but this building was in existence before, I believe. So I don't know that process was undertaken at all, given that it was in fact a building that did exist already. So
I think there was major renovation done inside that I would have thought would have needed a building permit, but
it should, I would think. But again, at this point, we don't do that. But we would have had to issue the zoning permit. So we just didn't have any record at all when the inquiry was made. We simply have nothing in our file about that. So if a building permit was obtained from the county, I don't know how that would have happened either, because they typically will not issue a permit until we have signed off on zoning. Unless that was done when the town was doing everything. And back to, we didn't have a file or anything in the file on that. That's not to say it doesn't exist. We could not find anything.
Anyone else? Okay. Do I need to read that? Okay, just so I
No,
know.
they made the motion and they seconded it.
Right.
So now just the vote.
Okay, all right. I guess I'll start on this end.
Vote aye.
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 Roll call vote. Okay. Parking enforcement license plate reader. Chief, you're up.
Madam Vice Mayor and Council, presentation before you is regarding a license plate reader for parking enforcement use only. This presentation is being brought back to you at the request of council in the meeting in March regarding looking into expanding the parking enforcement strategies when the initial parking enforcement presentation was presented. As a background, the system that has been presented is comparable with our current Flowbird and Up Safety vendors that we utilize for parking enforcement in the town currently. And in the new fiscal year budget, a parking enforcement officer position was approved, and that position has been filled. They will begin tomorrow in their position. The license plate reader will be utilized in the 2 paid parking areas of town, the downtown area and the Castlewood Park area, as depicted in the maps above. A license plate reader coincides with the current strategies for parking enforcement as directed by council and town ordinances for paid parking enforcement. The license plate reader is a dedicated system that is permanently affixed to a vehicle that's connected to a computer inside the vehicle. So as you drive by a vehicle, the cameras take pictures of every license plate, and it works with the Up Safety and Flowbird systems to identify which vehicles have been entered into the system when they pay for parking. And it will alert the driver of any vehicle that's not in that system as he drives by, at which point a citation or warning can be issued. The cost for this, the math was a little off on that. The actual price is $35,611. It's $500 less than what's depicted in the presentation. But the installation cost, we did talk to a couple other vendors regarding installation costs to see if we could get it any cheaper. And for warranty purposes, we could not. That $3,500 for installation is them flying a technician to the area to install it, so everything's warranted in the system. So we did try to look into that, and we cut out a few other add-ons that they were offering, like most vendors do, to try to reduce the cost to the lowest practical price point for the town. The recommendation would be, if the council so chooses, to move forward with the license plate reader purchase, to reallocate the funds from the CIP to the police department operating budget to move forward with the purchase. The funds were not put into the police department budget because it had not been approved by council when the budget was approved 2 months ago.
Okay. Any comments?
Can we ask questions before a motion or, okay. As I recall, when we were talking about parking enforcement back in March, one of the problems was we didn't have enough officers. We couldn't assign somebody specifically to enforce parking. And it seems like that has changed.
It will be changing this week, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so is this really as necessary as we thought it was in March, in your opinion?
I don't have enough data to answer that because they haven't begun the process. They will be working 4 6-hour days for a total of 24 hours a week. So after a few weeks of them in operation, I may be able to answer that better. But right now, we have not had them anybody dedicated to park enforcement for 4, 5, 6 hours at a time, like we will be moving forward.
And they'll be doing weekends and holidays and one other day?
Yes, ma'am. They will be doing the mostly weekends and then adjusted to a Monday holiday if a holiday falls on a Monday, based on the analytics from the parking ticket software of when the most citations are being issued and when the most parking fees are being paid.
And so this comes to us today as a recommendation for us to take action or to put on the regular meeting?
Either way is fine. We just can't move forward if this is the direction of council without the funds being reappropriated from the CIP to the operating budget.
And does this require any public hearing since it's a change to the budget?
In this amount, no. Large, if it exceeds a certain threshold, then yes, a public hearing would be required, but this amount would not.
So I wouldn't have a problem with putting it on the regular agenda for us to take action on, but I would like to hear if we could get some feedback from you as to how it's working with the officer designated, and if we still need to, if we think we still need, or council thinks, and the rest of the town staff thinks it still is a necessary expenditure.
Yes, ma'am. Would you like to bring this back to the regular meeting this month or another month?
This month, if you can.
Yes, ma'am. I'll try to have information for you by that time.
Yes, Mr. Williams.
Just a couple of questions for Chief Eater. Did you find out, because I was in a meeting with town manager on Wednesday and she wasn't sure, what are the annual fees? Like, how much will this cost us every year? And a question on top of that is, what is the expected revenue generated from this?
I can't predict the expected revenue generated because it's based on the amount of people that pay to park, or in this case, don't pay to park. For that to be determined. The annual fees are roughly $4,500 a year that would be added to our fiscal budget beginning next fiscal year if this is implemented. And that is for the service agreement with the vendor.
And do you have any idea how much in tickets we write every year, parking tickets?
I don't know the individual breakdown of costs. That goes to the finance department. I don't see costs of individual tickets. I can work with finance and try to figure that out. What we've done for this parking season.
I know last quarter, I think we did like 90 tickets or something like that, parking.
Yes,
And how much do we get usually for a parking ticket?
I do not have that information.
Thank you.
Finance is advising is $35 per ticket.
Okay, thank you.
How is that collected?
How is that collected or enforced if people don't pay their ticket? Do they have to go to, do we have to take them to court? Do we have to send an officer down to court to testify? I mean, how does, and what's their collection rate maybe?
I'd have to look more into that. So right now, when they get ticketed by our police officers, they're instructed to go to either the app or website to pay their tickets. So everything is done online, and I'm not sure if the vendor sends out second notices or things like that, but it's all pretty much done by Flowbird and Up Safety. We could check in to see what they do for outstanding, but right now it seems like we're getting a pretty stream of money in on a daily basis from Up Safety for our parking tickets.
How much of your time do you think that's gonna take? I'm sorry. How much?
Time to find out.
Yeah.
A couple of phone calls, probably to Up Safety or an email, and I'm sure they'll give us the information what they do.
That's a simple question. Knowing that we'll be utilizing this for the tags and stuff like that, we had also discussed doing away with our town stickers. Would that require us to get additional equipment to put on separate vehicles, basically all the time checking that? Or how would we utilize just the one system to go drive around the whole town to validate everybody's cars in their yards or all that kind of stuff?
Well, we're not really getting away from, we're getting away from the physical decal. The charge will still be out there for the vehicles you own that are garaged in Colonial Beach. So we'll make that clear. You're still gonna be paying that fee. So there'll be no physical decal, but all of those license plates, when you pay your personal property, they go into the Flowbird and Up Safety system. So they're flagged as paid. So that's how we'll be able to make sure that, everybody's got their decal. Well, technically it's all going to be electronic now. Their plates will be in the system and they will be free parking still.
Understood. I just wanted other people to hear that.
Yeah, right. Mr. Allison, to your point, I think the assumption would be that we would have one license plate reader on one vehicle, and that one vehicle would be utilized for enforcement.
Understood. I just wanted everyone else to hear that as well.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question to what you just asked. Because the sticker is one of the concerns. So if we get rid of the stickers, I don't know if you guys had a chance to actually research this or not. If we don't have that special plate reader, will you guys know what cars have decals or not? Like, is there a way to put that information in the Flowbird system as a paid parking person or something?
Yes, it would just be a much lengthier process because each tag would have to be scanned and entered by an individual. So instead of fractions of a second of vehicle driving by the vehicle, the parked vehicle, to determine if it's paid or not, an individual's gonna have to stand there and type it all out into the system to get the response. So you're going from 30 seconds to 3 minutes per vehicle based on the two different systems.
Thank you.
And those are estimated numbers.
And I'll tell you, I can share anecdotally, when we tested the system last year, it took about 5 minutes to write a parking ticket from beginning to end. So if you're thinking about an officer's time to go around, look at a plate, input the data, either issue a warning or citation from beginning to end to print it out, that's probably the time frame you're looking for each individual. So that begins to become costly. And as we have weather issues, heat, this is an individual that we're talking about doing this out and about. So there are some efficiencies as it relates to now having a civilian, as well as efficiencies to a system versus relying on handhelds on a daily basis.
So this reader, can it read the license plates on parallel parked cars that are right up against each other? I mean, how does it get in there to read that license plate?
That may be a little bit outside of my scope of technology, but it does have to hit the license plate at a particular angle. And I don't know the geometry of the other scientific.
So I'm just thinking so if the officer is driving through a paid parking lot, does he have to angle a certain way for it to read automatically, or can he drive by a line? I'm thinking about the savings in time, right?
For a regular parking lot, like Water parking lot or Castlewood, the vehicle will be able to read the vehicles parked in either front end or backed into a parking stall. For parallel parking, there would have to be a separation of the vehicles to be able to capture that license plate. What that exact separation is, I cannot tell you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dr. Sullivan, committee, board, and commission email accounts.
Okay, so we're gonna bring this back and is that the consensus of council? Have him bring it back.
Oh, okay, you want to do that?
I just asked.
I thought we were just talking, discussing.
Do you need any direction to bring it back on the regular meeting, with the questions being answered?
Yes, direction would be nice.
Okay, so is there a consensus?
Are we gonna have any council discussion or?
Yeah, well, you can, go ahead.
Okay. One of the things, with more information I'd like to get is, Ms. Oaks, I don't think you've had a chance to get a couple days ago, I asked for the balance of the capital improvement fund, just so we know where we're at. So maybe about next meeting, if you get that to me, unless you have it, at least have the balance now. I know the transaction's gonna take a little while to get, but,
Yeah, we'll have that information to you shortly.
okay.
Since this is just a work session,
Mhm.
that's, we're feeding them to get the information that we need, so.
Right.
I'm sure
Okay.
she will.
So that was just one of my concerns, it's just, do we have the money? We're on a spending spree, or at least I feel like it sometimes. So, I mean, I definitely think with the stuff we voted on earlier this year, like the bulletproof vests and, the life-saving stuff and all that, I'm 100% for all that, but this might fall in that category of nice things that people, are talking about, there's a difference. So I just urge council to consider, we have some really big priorities, pressing things in town, so I would like to make sure we all consider that before we vote to do something like this.
Are you ready for the next one?
So there is a consensus to bring it back.
That's,
I don't hear any objections, but I don't see any nodding heads either, so.
bring it back. Bring it back. Bring it back.
Bring it back.
Bring it back. Okay, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, I'm up next. I just retook the 4-year training online, as even though you don't have to take it every year, I highly encourage anyone that interacts with the public and represents the town to take the 4-year training on an annual basis, so you know about all the rules and changes. It came to my attention that our Planning Commission, our Parks and Rec Advisory Commission, they do not have town emails. They use their personal email accounts. And so if there is a request under FOIA to produce the emails between board members or between board members and somebody else that doesn't have a town email address, we would be exposing these volunteers. They don't get paid anything to having to submit their personal devices, and we would have to pay a town staff person to go through those and pull out anything that was pertinent to the FOIA request. And it just seems like a high risk based on the FOIA training that I have, that it would be better for the volunteers, for the town, for the public, if the people that represent this town all have a colonialbeachva.net email address. And so I asked a few questions, and at first was told that the cost was prohibitive because those of us that have a town email address also have access and use of Microsoft 360, which is very expensive. And so I had asked some folks to investigate that and see if there was an alternative. So I'm going to ask now if we have any more information on what that might cost, and is this practical? We're talking about another, I don't know, if we maybe 20 town email addresses.
We're looking at you, Ms. Town Manager.
So we've taken a look at this, and for all of our committees, boards, and commissions, it'll be about $1,000 annual cost for email accounts. So if this is something council would like to move forward with, we can move forward with budgeting that in future budgets and absorb that.
So I personally think that it would take the dedication of a town staff person to deal with all of this more than $1,000 a year. If that came to be. So I would like to see this. I don't know what we need to do if we put it on the agenda for the regular meeting to move forward with this, or if we can do it tonight. We don't usually make decisions at work sessions unless necessary. So looking for other input.
Okay, has anybody brought this to you to talk about having these emails?
All the members of the Planning Commission.
Tree shaking his head. Okay.
I got a question.
Sure.
India, when researching this, do we have any other options other than giving everybody Gmail accounts that's separate from their individual accounts, Yahoo accounts, whatever? What are the other options that we may have other than subsuming those into a colonialbeach.net? Not saying that that's a bad decision. I'm just trying to make sure that we're understanding all options here.
Yes, we did explore some other options myself, along with Adam, who is kind of our in-house IT resident expert and works with business. It really boiled down to, back to what Dr. Sullivan mentioned, kind of who had oversight of those email accounts. Our current system is through Microsoft, and all of those accounts are managed by one person and one contract through BizNet. So as we discussed FOIA, as well as ensuring that those documents can be recovered and maintained, in order to streamline the process and keep the same processes that we currently have. We came to the conclusion that if we were going to move forward doing this, keeping it in line with all the other email accounts that we have, but without the full Microsoft suite would be the best. Gmail just became, looking at a Gmail option became not the best option based on what we've researched, as we would be relying on a staff person to then have a whole nother system and then pay a whole separate bill and invoice, separate from what we already currently have, so.
I've got a question. How do we even enforce FOIA law right now if they're using the private emails? Like, how is that even legal?
So all the conduct of public business, regardless of the device, regardless of whether it's personal or owned by, it doesn't matter. The conduct of public business is always subject to FOIA. So when a request is received, those individuals who are impacted are contacted to provide and produce everything that would be responsive to the FOIA request. And again, even if it's on a personal device, if it is the conduct of public business, that is a communication or a document, I should say, that is subject to FOIA. If it is in your personal phone, for example, the rest of your private emails, which have nothing to do with the conduct of public business, would not then be subject to FOIA. They would not be responsive to the request. Conversely, on your town email, if your mother sends you an email and it's, happy birthday or something like that, that is not, notwithstanding the fact that it comes through your town email, that is not the conduct of public business and therefore is not a communication that is subject to FOIA.
Yes, sir.
The silent left side of the dais.
Normally I want it. so.
Okay. A short run solution, and I put this in the context of short run and having been in these positions before, if I were a planning commission member, I might just go ahead and open up a separate email account and then utilize that email account strictly for planning business. And that way, if there's a FOIA request in, I've got an identifiable, separated email address that I can respond to.
Great idea.
The benefit to, I will just point out to that point, that's the free option and the easy option and a very good one. The benefit from staff perspective, however, for record retention purposes and for down the line, should an individual, for example, no longer be on the planning commission, if it is in the town system, we will still have access to it and could still provide documents that would be responsive.
And if you have control of your own Gmail account, even though it's a different Gmail account, you have the ability to delete things that were written communication that should be retained by the town.
The technology of retention is far beyond my meager knowledge.
I understand the planning commission, but what else do we absolutely would need? I mean, can we limit it to planning commission? Obviously, they're sort of not government, but.
Well, the housing authority, we deal directly with the residents. We actually have to work with them on small minor home repair. So there's a lot of dialogue between us and residents and the town that should be a part of a town email and not, it's in a private
It's in
email.
your personal email?
Yeah.
So you fall under the town authority of the town?
Yes.
Okay.
And Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec, see.
And that's the 20? Okay.
I'm sorry, is there somebody else that would be included in this?
And BZA.
I can't hear you.
BZA.
BZA.
Oh, the Board of Zoning Appeals, thank you.
Anyone else?
We were just, as a group, the housing authority, trying to discuss getting our own phone line and trying to figure out an email and a website ourselves. It would be helpful if it was part of the town, because like you said, when members leave, there's always an issue with trying to figure out where the information is, who has the passwords, things like that. It would be nice if it was centrally in the town's hands.
So can we get a resolution for the regular meeting to do this? Do we need a resolution? Can we just direct the town manager to do so?
You can, and if you were to make a motion and vote on it tonight, that would constitute your resolution.
So moved.
We know where to get where's the funding coming from. Our budget's very tight, there's no extra money in it.
Ms. Adams Jacobs, do you have a source for $1,000 over the next year to,
I'll
future?
identify a source for the funding.
okay.
We'll postpone this until the regular meeting.
I just moved, Pat, to direct the town manager. It hasn't been seconded yet.
Second,
What is the direction
To have the town manager establish town email accounts for those people that conduct town business on a regular basis. And that includes the planning commission, the board of zoning appeals, the housing authority, and the parks and rec commission. And I would say, any other commissions that are formed in the future would fall under the same, it would be the same thing for them.
do we need a roll call? Yes.
In my opinion, this is something that should be put to a regular meeting versus a work session. It was just a discussion item as far as I could tell tonight.
Right. Okay. It wasn't a vote? We can, there's a motion on it.
There's a motion and a second.
Okay, there is a second?
You seconded it.
I thought I did it. I'm just getting used to this. All right, I guess we'll go ahead and vote then. Okay.
Nay.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes, passes. Okay. All right, Councilman Sullivan. Okay.
So this is an interesting, it's just an idea for a perk to our staff, and it came out of when I was attending a staff picnic that we had. Then we went down to the beach to play volleyball on the boardwalk, and most of the people that were town employees weren't able to park down there to play volleyball for this. And I thought, well, our town employees didn't get much of a cost of living raise, and would this be an easy perk to give town staff to cover the cost of their getting them registered as being able to park for free in town, is basically, we don't call it a town sticker anymore. So I asked some staff to check into it and give us some feedback on whether or not it would be possible. So can the town manager address that?
Yes, I've worked with Adam from our finance department to look into this a bit. What we've discerned this far is that we have a number of decals left that could be available for this purpose. Currently, we do not have an accurate number as to how many staff people live in town and who do not have a decal, so we'll have to poll them to see their interest as it relates to this topic. But he did have a little bit more to share as it relates from fire department and rescue squad as an incentive.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part.
The fire department and the rescue squad.
Yeah, every year the fire department and rescue squad gives me a list of members. And some of those members on that list get actually free personal property, as well as a free decal for vehicles that they respond to calls with. And then life members, get a free decal. It's typically around 15 to 20 per department. So 15 for rescue squad, 15 for fire department. And most of those have already been given out.
So just to clarify, we're already doing this for our first responders in the fire department and the rescue squad. Are we doing it for the police officers?
No, ma'am. There's no ordinance currently that does police department.
I would assume because they get paid.
I would imagine that's why it was that way.
Yeah.
This all started way before me.
So my thought on it was simply that we have a lot of town employees that live just outside of town in the county. And, if they didn't have to deal with parking issues, would they choose to come into town more often to spend some of their money? And would it not make it easier for them to enjoy the benefits of the town that may be prohibited because they can't park for free when they come into town?
No one has ever spoken to me about that, so I have no idea. Anybody have that experience?
Madam Jacobs, do we have a rough estimate on what that would be as savings? I mean, knowing if they're not purchasing one now, right? So, I mean, if we give out 20, it's $30 for a sticker for an in-resident type thing. So we're looking at not really saving money. I mean, what is the benefit or what is the recourse of not doing this?
Well, I think going back to the goal of incentivizing employees who live out of town to come back into town on the weekend and serve as a perk. I know, at least I've heard one staff person mention to me back when we tried the seasonal pass that was $300, that would have been cost prohibitive for those residents or for those employees who live out in the county or even in King George or in Fredericksburg. That if they had an opportunity for a lower rate for parking as an incentive, that they may come back into town on the weekend and enjoy the beach, just like people who live here full time.
So this would only be for individuals that live outside of the town. The employees that live inside of town will not get the $30 break on their.
I think that's up for you all to discuss.
My proposal was that all employees
would get
would get the break, yeah.
Would get one
Yeah,
vehicle.
and I saw it not only as an incentive to have them come back into town, but as a perk, considering the cost of living increases and the lack of our ability to give them much of a cost of living raise. I know that there's a lot of evaluation going on and people are, their salaries are being looked at through salary studies and things like that, but it was a very low cost of living raise, and I thought this might be a nice little perk that would show our appreciation for our town staff and not cost the town a whole lot.
Can I ask what staff recommendation is on this?
As this was a discussion, we have not formally done any real research into this at this point beyond some preliminary looks, so we do not have a recommendation at this time. However, anything that we can do to support staff is always welcome.
My next question is, if this is approved, are we then expecting that the teachers and stuff will then request a free sticker because they work?
Where do they park now?
Man, we're having a discussion.
I have a suggestion that might
No,
help.
you can't.
I'm literally just asking a question to the town manager about, are we gonna then receive a request from the school?
You can let them buy a ticket a sticker at resident price.
Understood, but we're giving out free stickers to individuals that would also live in town for one vehicle. So I'm just asking a question. Are we then planning to extend this to the school at some point, because they will then come request the same thing?
So one option would be to give everyone the $30 sticker, not just people that lived in town. That would be a benefit to the staff that live outside of town, but wouldn't be a perk for the staff that already live in town, which is why I proposed that staff. And I didn't include the teachers. I was looking at this as town staff because it was the town staff that I most interacted with. I do know that teachers did get a little bit better. They made it a little bit better with the budget than the town staff did. But maybe the schools might want to put it in their budget if they wanted to give it as a benefit for the teachers.
That would be up to them, that's not up to us. I mean, after sitting on the school board for almost 10 years, yeah, that's up to the school board.
Right.
That's not, we give them a certain amount of money. I would suggest that we think about this and bring it up at the regular meeting.
So can we ask the staff to come back with their recommendation at the regular meeting?
Sure.
Yes, we can do that.
Thank you.
All right, where are we? I know it's you again. All right. Council,
Sorry, E, ordinance review.
right. The dog release, seasonal enforcement.
So although this is under my request, again, this is something that Tom has been working on for a long time, looking at the ordinances, the ones that are enforceable, the ones that are not enforceable, the ones that are totally outdated. And we've broken it down into two parts for discussion. Previous administration have looked at the issue with dogs on the beach, the inability to enforce the dogs that visitors bring on the weekends in the summertime. Currently, dogs are allowed on the beach, on leash, under control, from October 1st to March 31st. And then when the season starts, they are not allowed to be on the sandy beaches or the boardwalks. But in the 10 years I've lived here, I've never seen it enforced, where an officer actually walks out and talks to somebody that's got a dog on the beach or a dog on the boardwalk. And so it was suggested previously, we're talking 5 or 6 years ago, some members of council were in favor of allowing dogs on the beach year round and enforcing the fact that they're on a leash or behaving instead of trying to enforce every dog on the beach. So I just brought it up for discussion, looking at the seasonality, the fact that there are already probably 15 or 20 dogs on the beach during the summer on the weekend, and at any given time, and the ability for us to enforce that ordinance. And would it also, becoming a dog-friendly place to visit, vacation destination is highly valuable in this day and age. There are a lot of beaches that really promote that, to bring your dog to town, because we are a dog-friendly town. And we started this process a number of years ago when Colonial Beach River Dogs started working and raising money to install pet waste stations around town. And they've been managing and maintaining that and continuing to raise the money to keep the supplies there and to maintain them. So it's really, I'd like to hear other council members' thoughts on this.
Yes, sir.
As the dog and grill police, I'll start. First of all, with regard to dogs during the season, I think it is a bad idea for two reasons. First of all, the beaches do tend to get terribly crowded, number one. Number two, not everybody is a responsible dog owner, or is every dog really wonderful around a lot of people. So I think we create a lot more problems than we solve by having dogs on the beach during peak season. Having said that, obviously then enforcement becomes an issue. I have been somewhat successful at politely asking people to leave. Of course, sometimes when I ask them to leave, I go away and they come back. But if we're going to enforce no dogs on the beach, then there are really two issues. We've got to have an ordinance. And an ordinance that has some teeth to it. So I can say to somebody, look, you want to keep your dog? I'm going to call the police. You'll get a summons and a fine. Okay, that's your alternative. And the other thought just escaped me. I'm sorry.
Dog,
Do what?
beach. I'm trying to get your brain.
Okay, but the other problem, sorry, I do a senior moment, if you'll appreciate that. The other problem, and I get faced with this, it's a service dog, okay? You know, some cases, they may be service dogs, but I run into situations where they ain't even on God's green earth, this is a service dog that you need. So from I guess almost from an ADA point of view, we may need to triage this to the extent that.
I can address that. That's my expertise.
Well, I know you can, but what I'm saying to you, for those of us that are slugs on the beach trying to enforce this, I would really need some kind of protocol to ascertain whether or not this person who's representing themselves to have a service dog is indeed legitimate, what the standards are, what the questions we need to ask are.
Yeah, you can ask two questions.
Okay.
You can ask, do you have this dog because of a disability that's covered by ADA? You cannot ask them what that disability is.
Okay.
It can be everything from PTSD to wheelchair bound. If they answer yes to that question, then you can ask them a second question, which is, what behavior does this dog do for you that you can't do for yourself? And if they can answer that question simply by saying, you know, when I have a PTSD attack, the dog nudges me to get me out. That's the only two questions that anybody can ask them, whether you're a law enforcement or a property owner or anything. They are very well protected. And yes, there are a lot of fake service dogs out there. But you will find that a legitimate service dog, generally, there is no license, there is no card, there's nothing. You can only ask those two questions. But if it's a fake service dog, there are lots of places on the internet that will sell you a service dog IT that you don't even need if you actually are, fall under that provision.
So what you're saying to me, there really is no certification.
Yes, Mr. Williams.
I'll give my 2 cents on this. I agree with Tom. I like the season that we have. I think that's good. I'm not sure how the residents feel. I would reconsider the boardwalk, but I'm not sure if that's something that's, palatable to the residents. I would definitely want their feedback first, but the beach, definitely not. Dogs going to the bathroom on the beach and kids stepping in it or people stepping in it, it's not a good idea. But that's my 2 cents.
And we already do have an ordinance that says you must pick up after your dog immediately upon defecation and dispose of it properly. So that is covered. And yes, there are people that do and there are people that don't, but you can give a ticket if they defecate and they don't pick it up.
Well, we also have an ordinance on littering and a variety of other things, but again, on this, I'm going to the chief to say this. If we're going to keep dogs off the beach, we have to have an ordinance, has to have teeth in it, and it has to sting if you're violating it. I don't know what, if we're not going to do that, then I'll keep asking folks to move dogs, and sometimes they will.
Yeah, I've got a suggestion that was brought to me by a resident. I know we've had the beach ambassador thing in the past and different things and with mixed success. One resident suggested maybe we get an employee that works under Parks and Rec, and they be the beach ambassador, but we don't call them beach ambassador, we call them something else, and they actually have like an official uniform, and they go out and they enforce these rules. they obviously don't engage with the public. They wouldn't be carrying a gun or anything, but they would be an official member of the town and represent, Parks and Recreation beach-wise. And then if they have any issues, they can contact the law enforcement to back them up or report it. Not necessarily confrontation with the residents, but kind of what Tom does when he's out there in his vest and telling people to get those dogs off the beach. Anyway, that's just a suggestion for the future, like if we're thinking about enforcing beach rules.
Thank you. Okay,
So, Tom, are you suggesting that we take a look at the ordinance and add some teeth to it if we're gonna keep it? Or, and maybe have staff come back to us with the different options for dealing with this?
Well, if the ordinance needs tweaking, and I would suggest some tweaking with regard to service dogs under the standard that you just articulated, number one. But number two, that we really need to look at an ordinance that is enforceable. So that if I have that miscreant who refuses to leave the dog, then I say, fine, I'll invite the police and we'll get you a ticket.
And could I ask the chief about how that could be, can that be responded to in a timely manner?
It can be responded to. A timely manner is going to be calls for service dependent. The department, the town attorney and the Commonwealth attorney did review this matter last month. It would have to be issued on a uniform citation by a police officer, so the parking enforcement individual does not have the authority to do it. And the handheld parking citation device that the town currently has only has parking citations in it. So they would have to go through the process of calling an officer for service, just like any other call. They'd have to get there, try to locate the individuals, and then issue the citation. So, what that time frame looks like on any given Saturday in June, July, or August, I really can't speak to.
It is.
I'm not concerned about.
It's a class 4 misdemeanor. I
was just trying to pull it up myself.
Yeah, it's a class 4 misdemeanor. And there is a carve out for service dogs.
Okay. Well, I'm not concerned about timeliness because if you're not going to leave, if you're going to stay on the beach with your dog, you're going to stay on the beach with your dog. So it's just a question of the police get there.
And so I guess I'm looking at it from the perspective of the many well-trained dogs that travel with their owners and the residents that have well-trained dogs and a good owner doesn't take its dog where it's uncomfortable and where it doesn't get along. So from a perspective of me, I look at it as a professional animal behavior as I would rather see an ordinance that enforces the dog's behavior. So if it's not on a leash, right, that's a violation. If they don't pick up, if the dog is barking or growling or becoming a nuisance, that would be a better reason to call in the police officer than just because it's on the beach.
I don't want to get involved in triaging conduct, and I think that's just a path to all sorts of problems. Okay, I think we've got to be either or. Either the dog's there or they're not.
anyone else?
I got a funny question for the chief. Have you ever written anybody a ticket for a dog pooping on the ground somewhere?
I personally have not, and I do not believe the department has since I've been here. I would have to research that further for you.
All right, anyone else?
So are we updating the ordinance? Are we not updating the ordinance? Are we?
I haven't heard, I've heard two people that are not in favor of it. I was in favor of looking at it and having someone give us a report on it. Certainly, the alternative is to put some teeth in the ordinance as it exists now, and what we're allowed to do that under the Dillon rule, I don't know how that.
My perspective would be is no dogs allowed as currently being listed. And it has nothing to do with the well-trained dogs. I'm looking at it in the perspective of maybe the kids or individuals that may be scared of the dogs, regardless if they're behaving well or not, would be a disservice to everyone else that's on the beach. So that would be my position.
One other suggestion that came up would be to have a designated beach where the dogs could, you could have dogs on this particular beach, but not on all of the other beaches.
I think the dog park would be sufficient for having individuals taking their dogs to the dog park rather than just directly on a beach that services the whole public, personally.
My suggestion would be retain the prohibition in the season, number one. Number two, carve out for ADA, definitive. And then number three, make sure we've got the ability to enforce the ordinance.
And to add specific, can you add specific penalties? I mean, can we do that?
Penalties are already provided in your ordinances. Generally, it's defined as a class 4 misdemeanor, and then there's a separate section that says, okay, all class 4 misdemeanors have this punishment. It's in state code. I have not reconciled your local ordinance with state code, but assuming that it comports, those are already defined.
So then it would just be a matter of somebody calling the police to come and issue a citation, right? If there's a dog on the beach.
For enforcement action, yes.
Yeah.
I would like to point out that a class 4 misdemeanor is just a finable offense. So we cannot put them in handcuffs and remove them and the dog from the beach. We just issue them a piece of paper like a traffic citation. And if they continue to stay there, then they can accumulate several of them. But that'd be very time consuming for the one officer on duty.
And do we know what that fine is?
I believe it's a $25 fine, but up to $250. Normally it's a $25 fine up to $250.
For a class 4 misdemeanor?
Correct.
So basically, it's just not enforceable. I mean, that's what I'm hearing. It's not a deterrent, it's really difficult to enforce. So
Of course
why
it
have
is,
the
but-
ordinance?
Class 4 misdemeanor is $250 fine. Is that right?
Up to $250.
Okay, well, we'll keep your dog, we'll charge you $250 and have a nice day.
We can't keep the dog.
If we ask them to, like, if they don't follow your order to take the dog off the beach, can't we get them for trespassing?
Ultimately, we could go down that road, yes.
How often does any of this happen?
Calls for dog on the beach occur weekly, if not daily.
During the summertime?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. I was just curious. Thank you.
I've only had 2 incidents where I had to tell someone to leave with a dog when I was doing my march from the boardwalk like Tom does.
Well, I don't do the marches, but I haven't driven down Irving. I drive it a lot, and I have never driven down Irving Avenue on a weekend that I didn't see at least 2 or 3 dogs on the beach playing. And what happens is the residents say, how come we let them get away with it, but we can't? I mean, that's really the negative feedback that I get from most people is that, you don't do anything about the beachgoers that come here and pay their money to go picnic on the beach with their dog. But if I walk out there on the beach with my dog, somehow or the other, they know that I'm a resident and they come after me.
All right, anybody else? Okay, let's go on to flooding flags.
Flutter flags is the same thing, all right? So a number of years ago, the Planning Commission redid the sign ordinance and they prohibited flutter flags in town. And somebody went around and notified all the businesses that had been having flutter flags that they had to take them down. And most of the businesses, I think, did initially, but then they popped back up. And so, some, they're enforced or they're not enforced. And I don't understand the reason that flutter flags were prohibited. I understand that a flutter flag needs to be out of the right of way, far enough back off the road so that somebody coming to a stop sign or turning left or right, is their line of sight is not infringed on. But I don't understand the reason for prohibiting per se flutter flags. And this night, I was asked by several businesses to investigate this, businesses that are conforming, and then they ride down the street and see new flutter flags a block down the street, right?
Anyone else want to comment on it? Flutter flag?
I don't have a problem with them.
I don't have a
don't
problem
understand.
with it,
It's
but yeah,
in 12-8 of the zoning ordinance. It is actually the first item, paragraph A. And that section is signs that are prohibited.
when did that go into effect?
I would have to research that because there's no date on this particular ordinance. Now, this section indicates that it was adopted in 2013, but when that specific provision may have been added or amended, or it may have had attention since then. I don't know the.
Maybe they've gotten better. They really don't bother me, but what do y'all?
I asked some people, residents, and one of the things one person said to me is I said, do you think you like them or no? And one person said, I think they look a mess. Most are left out all the time. They're usually common or on common property or right of way. Most are ratty condition. Businesses should use their money on proper signage on their building. My vote is they need to go because they are clutter. The flags left long-term on poles are a mess, also a mess. Temporary flags in good shape are nice, but not long-term. So that's just a resident's feedback that I got. And I guess I'm assuming the reason towns don't allow them a lot of times is because they kind of they're not attractive. I mean, I don't think there's too many people in here who say, oh, I love the looks of flutter flags, flutter signs. And so, I mean, we're trying to class up our town. I mean, we're trying to, make our main streets beautiful. That's what downtown Colonial Beach is all about. So that's just my feedback.
We are a beach town, and flutter flags are very typical in beach towns. Some businesses put them up, they basically are an open sign. So when they open, they put it up. When they close, they take it down. Yes, there are people that leave them up all the time and they get raggedy. I definitely think we can enforce them not being in the right of way or being set back far enough off the road so as not to be a line of sight problem for traffic. But we are a beach town, and I've never been to a beach town that didn't have those kinds of signs.
And I believe we have ordinances against permanent signs. There's strange sign ordinances in this town, Tom. Is that true? Permanent signs. Permanent signage. There are ordinances against certain types of permanent signs.
They have to conform to, there's a permanent sign ordinance, if I'm not mistaken, that talks about what that permanent sign, the conditions it has to meet. So I guess if they put up a flutter flag and they didn't take it down, it
It's
would be a
temporary.
permanent sign that wouldn't conform to the permanent sign ordinance.
It's allowed because it's movable and temporary. I'm sure most of these businesses would love to put up a new sign, but I don't know about the ordinances, but I don't believe they're allowed. Some of the signs we have now are grandfathered in.
Yes, Mr. Williams, can you say something?
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna, oh, shoot, I lost my train of thought.
Senior moment.
Yeah, I guess so. I just had to get to the senior part. I ain't quite there yet, but no. Yeah, I'm just not sure. Oh, I was gonna ask about the ordinance. I guess this would require an amendment to our ordinance. I guess not, if not a public hearing, at least a public notice.
This is actually in the zoning ordinance, so this would require a public hearing. and I'll go over this process shortly when we talk about the other amendments, but because it is in the zoning ordinance, it would require a public hearing before the planning commission as well as town council.
So how does council feel about sending this back then to the planning commission to relook at?
So moved.
Second, I like that.
I vote aye.
I'd personally like to see something on the short-term rentals. We've been waiting for like a year on that, so I'd like to see that before something like this. That's my personal opinion.
Well, we will send it back, and there are some timelines when we send them something as to when they have to respond, right? And I think we've already sent them the short-term rental.
That is correct, and it is currently under their review. According to your ordinance, when you refer a matter to the planning commission, for a text amendment, which this would be, they are supposed to report back to you within 60 days. The referral date is their first regular meeting following the referral, and their next regular meeting is scheduled at the end of August. So they won't be getting together unless they call a special meeting. They will not be together as a collective until the end of August. So that would start the 60 days.
So I would argue in favor of the motion that's been seconded to send it back to the planning commission to take a look at.
Just a suggestion, since this is gonna, take a lot of time up from the planning commission and others, the town staff, should we try to get a consensus if we're actually in favor of it? Because we're asking them to allow flutter flags, correct? Isn't that what we're basically doing by referring it to them?
Correct. Well, it's an ordinance review, so we have an ordinance on this, but yes.
There's a motion and a second. We can just vote on whether or not we're going to send it back to the planning commission.
That's what the motion is, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
With that, we don't have a recommendation to them yet.
Just a little bit of, okay. All right. I started there.
Aye.
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 There we go. Okay. Okay.
Can I ask for clarification real quick for that? In the 60-day time frame, does that public hearing have to be within those 60 days?
Yes, the 60 days, according to your ordinance, the 60 days. Now, that begs the question, always, every time I see a requirement in an ordinance, my next question is always, or else what? What
Right.
happens? And honestly, there are no consequences except for the true consequence, in my opinion, is that you could then take action. In other words, if it's held, you could then take action and you could presume approval or a
Understood.
positive recommendation. So,
Understood. Thank you.
okay. All right, you have in front of you tonight three proposed and recommended ordinance amendments. These are from a list generated by Councilman Moncur in his hard work to identify ordinances. In fact, he identified two lists or two groups of ordinances. One group, and these three before you tonight are selected from the first list that I call it the first list, which is ordinances for repeal. And so I brought three of those. There were 5 on that list. The other 2, I had a few questions, and they were it seemed to be a little bit overwhelming to include all of them. So I chose 3, probably the low-hanging fruit for tonight. The other list are ordinances would be comprised of ordinances that should be reviewed, not necessarily repealed, but definitely reviewed and taken a close look at. So that's the other list. We're not, again, nothing before you tonight is from that list. These are just from the repeal. So next slide. Okay, so, and this just summarizes what I was talking about. What's before you tonight for council review is these are out of chapters 2, 8, and 11, and this is out of your town code of ordinances, not your zoning ordinance. So this is just your town code of ordinances. The next two on that list, which again are not before you tonight, but those are chapters 6 and 17. So I'll be bringing those to you. So chapter 2, the next 3 slides, I've just summarized for you the data that you have, the drafts that you have, which have a lot of red on them. But I've summarized for you what that is. So the first part in Article 1, this is all Chapter 2. Article 1 would be to remove and then reserve sections 2-1 through 2-4. That's because the current language relates to the rental of the Eleanor Park property, and that no longer happens. And that was discontinued. The park has been preserved in open space, that sort of thing. So those provisions are not relevant.
Well, I should point out that in our package, you've got that red line, if y'all want to follow along with that.
Correct. Yes, thank you. And then Article 2 in Chapter 2, sections 2-16 and 2-17. I have indicated that they were edited for clarity. You can see, I removed, just so you know, I generally will remove specific references to the Code of Virginia, because as those code sections are changed or renumbered and all of that, then you have the obligation then to go back through your entire town code and renumber. So I generally make a more vague reference to the Code of Virginia, just to not get into that problem. And then in 2-17, I just said the town manager. So that was just clarification, things that I caught. And I do not profess to have, I did my best. I may or may not have caught absolutely everything, but I tried really hard to find those little things, which leads me to the next item, which is 2-20. It referred to your treasurer, but now instead you have a finance director. And 2-21, Commonwealth, as opposed to state. Mr. Montier, you're welcome.
2-17, where you changed he to the town manager, to make that gender specific.
Yes, ma'am. And then 2-23.1 is, I'm suggesting striking that and reserving that section as not applicable. At this point in time, because you do have an increased staff, in the absence of the town manager, there are other staff members who can assume the responsibilities and keep the lights on, so to speak. That being said, 2-23 likely falls into that category. Mr. Montier brought this to my attention, and I agree that I would suggest, this is a policy decision, so I did not initially take the liberty of striking that as well, but I do think it would be appropriate to do so, to strike 2-23 as well and reserve that section.
Well, I'd identify this for review for a purpose, because I thought that you've advised it doesn't technically violate the Constitution or the statute, but it certainly violates the intent of the Constitution and the statute. I would suggest, if I may suggest a draft replacement, that we permit the town manager to designate or to delegate somebody to act in her absence when we have planned absences. We may want to have a provision in there, though, that if there's an emergency, to empower the mayor then to appoint somebody to act as town manager. You'll follow that if there's an emergency situation, then task the mayor with appointing somebody to take over those responsibilities.
Should that be just the mayor or council? I mean, should it be an authority that the mayor has standalone on, or should it be a council decision to appoint?
Well, understand, Karen, I'm envisioning an emergency situation. You know, if our town manager is on leave as a program absence, then it's when the town manager has an emergency and there needs to be an emergency appointment. I think it'd be appropriate for the mayor to designate somebody to act on behalf of the town manager.
So I'm assuming that an emergency where the town manager could not appoint someone, so she's unconscious or deceased or whatever. I'm assuming that I think that should be a council decision, even if it requires a special called meeting, to appoint somebody in her place for an emergency where she is unable to appoint someone.
Well, that gets around the problems of emergencies. If you have, who's gonna call the meeting? I would be comfortable with the mayor in an emergency
And this,
situation.
with this mayor, but what about future mayors? We don't know who's gonna be in that position, and we know that that has been a problem in the past.
Got to pin the tail on a donkey somewhere, so.
Shouldn't we have, shouldn't we have like, two different scenarios, like an emergency is one. If for some reason the town manager leaves or whatever happens, don't take it personally. But no, but so maybe the town manager needs to be appointed on a longer term basis. I've heard historically, we've had mayors that have acted as town manager for many years off and on. So I think we should distinguish the emergency part of it and the more long-term part.
Well, do we want to designate a deputy town manager who would fill that role? And that's, at this point, that's somewhat ambulatory, but perhaps I'm throwing that out as a suggestion, having a designated deputy gets us around that.
Do we have examples from other small towns or small cities, how they handle this?
It ranges the gamut, but oftentimes it's not addressed, assuming that the town manager would designate someone, or that town council would then designate someone to fill that role, get together relatively quickly, which I think is what you're suggesting. And in some instances, it is exactly like this because their staffs are very, very, very small. So it sort of spans the spectrum depending on the size of the town, and whatever format. I know that's a non-answer, but it could be whatever you want it to be, truthfully. But probably most common is the existence of a deputy, and that person can be called whatever, but the town manager would designate in the event that they
In other words, the town manager would designate somebody in advance, saying that
Right.
if there's an emergency and I'm incapacitated,
Yes,
this would be my designee to cover for me.
correct.
And that's what you've done, correct? Yeah. So it seems to work with that. I mean,
I think the reasoning behind this is, don't take this the wrong way. If she gets in a car accident and she's unable to designate someone because of an emergency, I'm in the position of agreeing with Tom and saying that collectively, I think the mayor could designate someone until recovery or another situation within the town council can get together.
Well, I agree with
and then
that.
do that.
But I still think if she could designate in advance, if something was to happen, that would be
Having a standing
having a
standing
standing
designee,
designee.
regardless of whether
Yeah.
that's what I understood you to say.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think now that there is a town attorney, most naturally, in most localities, if it's not the city manager, it would be the city manager, town manager, it would be the attorney. So it would be designee or town attorney.
Well, theoretically, the town attorney wouldn't do anything to get us into big trouble until we have somebody else in place. I like that.
I do too.
So in the absence of the town manager, how was your originally worded that the town manager shall designate someone to perform their duty? And this person can be pre-designated as a standing?
Yes,
You have to word it the right way. but-
Yeah, I would recommend maybe that we bring this chapter back at the regular meeting and perfect that language.
Well, I was gonna suggest we bring them all back simply because although they don't require a public hearing, I think it would be good to publish it and have public comment on it at the regular meeting.
That's coming up. That is,
Okay.
I do think that it's a best practice, and you're right, it's not technically required, but it is a good practice. And oftentimes, when ordinance amendments like this are considered public hearing requirement or not, it's nice to have a first read and some consideration and then a vote.
So we should put this on the agenda I mean, we haven't gone through them all, but put this on the agenda for the regular meeting and have a special public comment period about each of them.
That will be my recommendation, a couple of slides down.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No,
Jumping
that's
the gun.
fine, that's fine, but not specific to a particular meeting. That would be whatever the pleasure of the council is, but to conduct a public hearing, just because I think it's a nice practice.
Would we want to put that in terms of, number one, ordinances to be deleted and then ordinances to be revised?
Typically, I just do it in, by chapter and, just show the amendment. Part of it's being deleted, part of it's being changed, reworded, that sort of thing. It just sort of all meshes together, but by the chapter number.
So you would allow the public to comment on each chapter,
Yes,
and then we would take action if necessary.
yes, that would be my suggestion. And well, it could be collectively or the three together, or you could take them chapter by chapter. Either way would work, and neither way would fulfill any legal requirements. And they actually exceed legal requirements. Okay, but are we okay to move to the next one? Okay. The repeal of, let's see, 223.1, we talked about that. So Article 3, the grievance procedure, that is contained, and I did confirm with the HR director, that is contained in the personnel manual, and in my opinion, that's where it should be. There are several things in your ordinances that really are more policy in nature, and so I am suggesting on more than one occasion, this being the first, that it not actually be in your ordinances, but in your policies and that it live elsewhere, because that's just a more appropriate place for it to be. So that's the only reason for this. We do need to look at that, and I did speak briefly with the town manager that probably needs to be looked at to make sure it is current, because those rules and laws do change rapidly. Especially in the past, probably 24 months, they've changed dramatically. But notwithstanding, no matter what amendments or not, I would suggest that they be in the policy. So that's why I'm suggesting that be repealed. Moving on to the next part, 2-71 and 72. 72, there is no town treasurer at this point, so I'm recommending that be repealed. And then 2-91 through 92. Let's see, let me make sure I'm looking at it properly, that it's redundant to state law. There's so many pages. It's talking about special meetings and rules of order, and you adopt those annually. So special meetings and notice requirements are covered under state law. And again, same thing, in the event state law is amended, it's not necessary that it be here because it is required. And with FOIA being so robust now, and it probably was not when this was adopted, that is definitely covered under state law. And then your rules are adopted every year as you adopt your rules of procedure. So I just felt like those provisions were not necessary. And same thing, I hate to run the risk of potential conflicts with state law, past, present, or future, inadvertently. All right, moving on, Chapter 8. These are the easy ones, Chapters 8 and 11. Chapter 8, you have that I'm understanding, no dealers in precious metals and gems. And so, Councilman Moncure had wisely identified this is not particularly relevant. And also gambling, same thing, Chapter 11, is not relevant to current town operations.
I understand that, gambling is not allowed, except in the river. But, I mean, could a gym business want to come into town, in which we would need something to address that?
They could, and I did pull the state code relating to that, and there are provisions I could, if you were interested in keeping this, again, this was on the list for recommendation for repeal, so that's the path that I took. If you would like to potentially reserve this chapter, I would then reconcile with state code if you would like to keep it.
Well, the idea behind that is that state law controls whatever.
Yes.
Question is whether we then have an ordinance underlying that, and really the only purpose, perhaps, I mean, the only purpose of having an ordinance is for revenue, frankly, if you're going to enforce it. But you've always got the state law that you can enforce problems. And then the question is whether you need a separate ordinance for the town under that. And in the absence of having dealers at this point, I don't think we need an ordinance. If one
So
moves.
it wouldn't prohibit a dealer from moving in if we didn't have an ordinance.
No.
It wouldn't prohibit someone from opening a business here. It would just mean they were governed by state code. I think we did something recently about the tattoos. At one time, tattoo parlors were illegal in Colonial Beach, and they're obviously not anymore, so.
And that's the second bullet point on both of these. The Councilman Moncur is exactly right, that these are governed by state code. The only benefit of having a local ordinance is if you wanted to charge under a local ordinance instead for any violation, and therefore the revenue would be local. But it's so nominal. I mean, it doesn't hurt anything, but we can reconcile if you would
So
like to.
can we
keep it,
get the state police to come enforce the no dogs on the beach? Nobody else laughed.
So, okay, so on this slide I've just outlined, just so you have a little cheat sheet about the code amendment process. So town code ordinances, which is the left-hand column, and that's what you're looking at tonight. So your town code consists of 23 chapters. Proposed amendments go directly to you, town council. Public hearing is recommended but not required except for certain purposes. So there are a few purposes where it is absolutely required, and you engaged in one of those last year, I think it was, when the refinance or debt restructure took place. So you have to have a public hearing. For budget, for example, you just did that back in the spring, that's required. So there are certain instances, but generally speaking, they're not required. And you may act at any time. And on the in the right-hand column, I just outlined the process when matters are out of your zoning ordinance, like the signs. The current ordinance consists of 29 articles. I did recommend recently in Article 30 or drafted a starting point. It's not perfected, definitely, but a starting point for an Article 30. Proposed amendments must go to the Planning Commission. That is, it's not just may, they absolutely must. That is out of state code. A public hearing is required at both levels, at the Planning Commission and at Town Council. Then a recommendation is to be made within 60 days that for text amendments again, and we talked about that earlier. Then there's the reference to your zoning ordinance, just so you know where that comes from. And upon receiving the Planning Commission recommendation, you hold your own public hearing. You may do those jointly. So that's fine, but this is out of your ordinance. That's the process that is outlined. And then you may act at any time. And I did include that little blurb at the end. That's also out of your ordinance. Any ordinance to amend a zoning ordinance, you must state a public purpose. So a lot of times you will see in anything that I draft, it will say, and the public purpose is. That's why I put that in there. And that's it. We will plan to bring these back, but are there any questions or additional requests? You've made some tonight.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Vivian, for all your hard work on this. This is something that's been needed for a long time.
Understand this is the start of a process.
Right. You're gonna be around for a while.
No. Anybody else have anything? Are you good to go? We can adjourn. If I get a motion to do so.
So moved.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
I thought we could do it a little report. Okay, who's going to be aye? Meeting adjourned.